Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 215 of the Observed.Tech podcast. This is the last show for 2016. This coming Saturday night is New Year's Eve, and of course, the 1st of January is on Sunday. So, doing something a little bit different this year in that I wanted to do like a year in review. I went through all the work we've done over the last year at SuperSite and the podcast and Microsoft news and Microsoft events, and I pulled out a summary, an event line of what's gone on throughout the year. So I've got a few key stories around different subjects, and then I've got a couple of big ticket items for each month. So we'll walk through the things, we'll talk a little bit about it. And for those of you that are not watching live, we're actually live streaming this show for the first time, video and audio, to YouTube Live. So if you were able to tune in, thanks for helping me test this process out. It's been a learning experience, but I think we've got it figured out. And it seems like the stream is working okay. So I will ultimately have the video and audio available for you to watch that way as well. So let's get started a little bit. First off, a reminder that we are still a proud member of the Geeks Networks, geeksnetwork.com. So go check those guys out for all the great shows they have. So to start a year in review show, I've got to go back to last December, because last December I made my predictions for 2016. I looked at some stuff, and let's see, where were we at last December? We had just gotten the November update to Windows 10, the first feature update, and we had just barely gotten the first Redstone 2 build, or I'm sorry, Redstone 1 build, which would eventually become the anniversary update. So what was I looking at back then? What kind of predictions did I make? Now, I've currently got a story in edit that's going to come out tomorrow where I look back on these predictions and give myself grades. But then I also talk about the future. I talk about 2017. But some of the stuff that I was concerned about with Windows 10, or that I was looking to see be done with Windows 10, is a centralized and sync action center. I think we still don't quite have notifications down well, especially across multiple Windows 10 devices. That continues to be an issue today, a year later. So it's an area that needs a lot of work. I talked about feature parity in Windows 10 mobile apps that are from Microsoft compared to their iOS and Android counterparts. And although we've made some gains there, such as with the authentication app, we now have push notifications for some of those. It's still not quite there across the board. Family Groove music subscriptions. I don't think we can keep asking for this enough. Almost every major music service now has family music subscription options, and we really should have something like that for Groove Music as well. Virtual desktops. I talked about virtual desktops. They're neat, but they're very, there's no steady kind of feed for them. There's no steady kind of setup. I wish I could create a default virtual desktop that I can open and it would automatically have certain apps open. I wish I could more readily manage those and manage them offline and then activate them with the push of a button or something like that. So I'd certainly like to see more improvements there as well. System reliability. I think system reliability has improved a lot. However, there's still some issues. And when I talk about system reliability, it goes back to a story I wrote last year called the Windows 10 Experience Variable. And that is how things can vary between so many different people. Now, PC configurations are massive, so it's going to be a different experience at times. And a lot of that's driven by drivers, OEM hardware. So reliability needs to be a continued focus for Windows 10. And then I did a bonus kind of prediction and said we need more detailed information about updates, and we are actually getting those now. There's actually a dedicated page to Windows 10 updates. There's even one now for the Xbox One console where you can see new builds for that as well. So we've made some progress in this past year, and we're going to talk about that progress as we go on down this list. And we're going to start off by talking about momentum. The last official update from Microsoft is that there are over 400 million Windows 10 users. That was in September. That was at the keynote for Microsoft Ignite in Atlanta, which I was at. And we have not heard anything new then. So that's October, November, December. That's 3 months we haven't heard a new update number, a new momentum number they call them. So my back then I said it, and I stick to this. It's going to have slowed down a lot because the reality is the free upgrade stopped on the 29th of July. And then we got the anniversary update on the 2nd of August, 1 year after the release of Windows 10, or just a little bit more than a year. And so where's that momentum at? The biggest part of the momentum is now going to come from enterprise and business upgrades. Department of Defense is doing a big number of upgrades, although they've run into some hitches to get down that road. So we definitely are going to see a slowdown. There's no doubt about that because of the free upgrades going away. Now, there are some interesting numbers out there right now. As of August, Microsoft's official numbers based on telemetry show about 42% of users are on Windows 7 now. You've got about 15 on Windows 8, 8.1, and 8.1 is the only official supported version. And then, of course, you've got what the number was, 43%, I think, that said it was 43%, I think was the number. Hang on, I'm just bringing up my what I wrote. Yeah, 43% of Windows 10, Windows 7 is at 42, and Windows 8, 8.1 is at 15%. So one of the things I wrote in my story that's going to come out tomorrow is that I think we need to have, they need to reopen that free upgrade offer, but they need to do it in a very specific way. No helper apps, nothing through Windows Update. Just make it available for download. If somebody wants to do it, use the same digital entitlement process that has been used in the past, but just open the door to the free download, because you're on the consumer side, because that's a great audience. You still got nearly half of the users, over half actually. If you add the 43% and the 15%, you've got over half of the people out there still on not Windows 10. And Microsoft really wants to get folks on Windows 10, but you take away the push, you take away the hustle, and you just give people the option to download it. You don't pop up alerts and things like that. You just get away from that, because last week Chris Cospola, I think is his name, he's a marketing guy at Microsoft, the chief, and he talked about the fact that they really did go too far with that process. So offer it, make it free, make it available, but then just let people go get it. Don't push it down. Where do we stand with testing? Now, we did something new this year. When we started testing in earnest in January of 2016, we built a PC and mobile insider preview build tracker. And that's how I was able to kind of go back and analyze over the course of time until we got the release in August. So we did that tracker for Redstone 1. I currently have a Redstone 2 tracker for Windows 10 for PCs and mobile that I'm using to track the updates. So you can go to one spot, you can see the summary of the updates, and you can kind of keep an eye on the pace. Now, I'm expecting, we're currently in a hiatus from new builds right now because it's the end of the year, but we expect things to pick up either maybe next week or the week after, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on down the road, down the notes. So, and by the way, everything I'm talking about in this show, just like every other episode of Observed.Tech, I will have on the show notes page. So you'll be able to go to our wiki at winobs.com and click on these links if you're interested in going to see more. And I took a look at where we stand with builds, how the pace has been. I mean, think about it. Do you remember back before Redstone 1 or the anniversary update got released? It seemed like there was a couple of weeks we got 2 or 3 builds in the same week. It really got fast, and it really sped up when Donna took over as chief of the Windows Insider program, Donna Sarkar. And so I fully expect that to happen in the new year. There's 2 things you got to keep an eye on, and Brad Sams reported on this on Petrie.com, throughout.com, is that we're probably very close to them finalizing the code for the Creators Update that's due out in March. That's Redstone 2. That was supposed to come out this year, but it got delayed last year around this time, January, February, or this year. And so we fully expect them to start to lock down the feature set and just start working on tweaking bugs and performance for those last 6 to 8 weeks before Creators Update comes out in March. We have done a tremendous amount of work on SuperSite this past year with tips for Windows 10 for the anniversary update, for Windows 10 in general. Many of them apply on both sides. So if you are looking for tips or you're trying to get somebody started with Windows 10, you've got that resource. Also, the Getting Started app that comes as default with Windows 10 is a great way to kind of learn the ins and outs of Windows 10. So we know where we stand with the momentum of Windows 10. We're waiting to hear the latest numbers. We know where we stand with testing. We're in this nice hiatus right now, but we're ready to get going again. Especially after the leak of the build that's out there, and I'm going to talk about that later on. There's some really cool stuff coming, it looks like, at least. So back in January, what were the big news? Do you remember the big issue that started the year off for Microsoft? And that was the Surface Pro power cord recall. Remember, there were some reports of them crimping and causing issues and a fire risk. So Microsoft had a massive recall of those where they would ship people replacement ones. They just replaced one end of it from the brick to the device or brick to the wall. I can't remember which, because it was fraying. It was there was a problem with the cord, but it didn't start off good. But apparently that process went very well, and Microsoft didn't have any major issues doing that. But then we had the big hoo-ha about the Surface in the NFL, in the National Football League here in the U.S. and U.S. football. During the one of the conference's championship games, the Surfaces stopped working properly. Now, we learned, it was reported initially the Surface failed. Turns out it was the infrastructure. Turns out it was the Wi-Fi and the network connectivity that had an issue. So that got sorted out. Microsoft confirmed that Surface worked exactly like it was supposed to, but it was related to the infrastructure. So hopefully they have sorted that out. What else was going on? Oh, I got to go to a conference down in Fort Lauderdale, the Wearables Expo, and learned a lot about different types of wearables. I learned, spoke to a guy, heard a guy speak about the Digitize Me. It's kind of this whole live stream, document my life type thing. And he was demoing a camera that you wore around your neck for this. I'm reading, as I'm getting my CES pitches for next week, I'm reading a lot of those types of cameras, where you wear them and they kind of record your life and what's going on. And also, where the issue with wearables and keeping them out of the sock drawer. Heard a great presentation by a representative from Gartner that talked about how do you make a wearable that doesn't get thrown off, that doesn't stop getting worn. And we all know, if you've ever gotten one of those, you have seen what happens. Those things just get tossed aside. I mean, I'm in that situation right now with Microsoft Band. I just don't wear them anymore. Let's see. One big video I did in January was managing Microsoft Edge favorites. Microsoft Edge does not have the same type of a robust tool for managing favorites like Internet Explorer has. However, it is possible to manage those favorites, and we did a very popular video back in January about managing just that. In February, a lot of discussion about Windows Phone because we had Mobile World Congress 2016 in Barcelona. I wrote a lot about whether Windows Phone was alive, dead, or dormant. It was a big time. That's when all the consternation started happening with Windows Phone and Windows 10 Mobile, because remember, at this point, we've had Windows 10 released. We've had the November update released for Windows 10 a couple months earlier, but we still did not have an official Windows 10 mobile release for Windows 8.1 Windows Phone handsets. And then when it finally does get released, the whole issue becomes it didn't get released for all handsets, as they kind of indicated that they would do. So lots of issues the entire year long talking about Windows 10 Mobile. What else did we talk about? The Department of Defense, that was when they came out with their big announcement to move to Windows 10. They approved the Surface devices for use in their systems. So that was a great opportunity for Microsoft. Now, they've had some hitches, some slowdowns and things like that, so they've had to kind of back off the 1 year kind of aggressive time frame they initially laid out. But I think they're getting that figured out. And in fact, just recently, Microsoft got almost a $1 billion support contract with DoD to support their devices and to support their hardware. And I wrote my kind of about how I use OneNote and going paperless with the cloud. And in fact, I'm reading my notes right now from OneNote because this is how I prepare my show each week. But OneNote has become a terrific tool. It's become so robust in so many different ways for whether you're a small business, whether you're an individual. They have school notebooks. Teachers are using this to help their students. The students are using it to turn in homework. I mean, there's terrific potential with OneNote, and it's one of my favorite tools. And so I wrote up how I used it to go paperless by using OneNote and the Cloud Sync that it has available. Then we rolled into March, and it was out to San Francisco for Build 2016 in late March. Early April is when that was going on. It was in March that we learned that Redstone 2, what was going to be the anniversary update that got released on August 2nd, had been delayed because, if you remember, the initial intent was for 2 feature updates a year being released by Microsoft. And so they took and delayed that Redstone 2 release. Initially, it was released until early 2017. Eventually, it got released. Let me rephrase this. So we had Redstone 1. That was the anniversary update. I'm getting them confused. That was going to release sometime maybe early mid-year, got pushed to the fall. Redstone 2 got pushed to early 2017. Redstone 2 being what we now know is the Creators Update. That is expected in March. All the indicators are it's going to be 03 or 1703, which is March 17. So that seems to have come true. I mean, that was predicted back in March, a whole year before the delay, and we've since seen the indicators that show we're going to get Creators Update in March. Microsoft made a big change with their MVP program back in March as well. They announced that all the consumer categories were going to be removed from the program, and it was going to be purely focused on IT Pro, developer, and that type of stuff, which makes sense because the developer evangelist branch of Microsoft took on the program the year before. So it does make sense that they made some changes. Those changes took effect in, I believe, 1 July. They did start a new Windows Insider MVP program, and they brought in about 125 of us, or maybe 200 of us, into that new program. So we got to meet with them this year at Summit several weeks ago. So that has changed a lot, but it's still a lot of the similarity is there as well. And then in March, we finally got the first release on Windows 10 Mobile became available. Now this was March, so we're talking about 8-9 months after the initial release of Windows 10. So as you might imagine, there was a lot of a concern from users and Windows 10 Mobile users, and then it didn't go to all the handsets. It only went to a subset, and that caused some issues, and it was just not a very pleasant time around Windows 10 Mobile because a lot of people perceived it that Microsoft had broken some promises, that they said all Windows Phone 8.1 handsets would get it, and then it changed because the hardware requirements changed. So it's just a continuation of the tough year that it's been for Windows 10 Mobile. And in fact, that build, Terry Myerson told, I think it was Tom Warren from The Verge, that mobile is not their focus this year. And it hasn't been, but mobile hasn't been abandoned. It's still being developed because we're still seeing builds for it. Where it's going to go down the road, we don't know. And we know at this point, late in the year, that most of there's not been a new handset for a while from Microsoft. There's been a couple of other handsets released by OEMs, but Windows 10 Mobile is kind of languishing right now, and it's an app problem. It is an app problem. It is an app problem. It is an app problem because I've learned this moving to Android, and my wife on iPhone now, is that the apps are there for those things. They might be one-time use apps or one-use apps that solely for that one purpose. And, you know, I've got over 80 apps on the phone, whereas with Windows 10 Mobile, I didn't. Part of that was that weren't available. But I learned also this year on Windows 10 Mobile, you can use the mobile web for a lot of things. So it's going to continue to be a tough time until we hear more whether this Surface Phone is going to come or whatever is going to come down the road from Microsoft. Although some of the things they announced at WinHack are going to play into that. So we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. March was also when we saw the first previews for Microsoft Edge extensions. Very small group of extensions were available. They became formally available with the release of the anniversary update on August 2nd. Only 13 extensions were available at that time in the Windows Store for Edge. That has now grown to 22 just as of a couple weeks ago. But the reason for that is that it's still a closed program. It's not open to everybody. So the folks that just anybody and everybody can't convert their Chrome extensions into ones for Microsoft Edge and get them in the store. So when that opens up, which I think might happen with, the Creators Update in March, if that opens up the door, then we should start to see that collection grow very fast. Now, there's some good extensions in there, don't get me wrong. And we've got ad blocking, we've got password protection or password management, and we've got multiple options for each of those now. But there still could be a whole lot more. And then the other thing that happened in March was Microsoft decided that they were going, they had changed their Windows 7 and 8.1 support plan for Skylake devices, that they were only going to support those for a limited amount of time, and then newer devices were not going to be able to go to on Windows 7 or 8.1 on those Skylake devices from Intel. Well, they backtracked that. It's all changed. The normal support cycle is there. But again, it was a messaging issue with Microsoft that created a lot of confusion, created a lot of concern. And so users, the social media reaction was unreal. So they did backtrack on that and went back to their norms when it comes to support for Skylake devices. And then in April, build was at the end of March, beginning of April. That's when I was in San Francisco for that. So that was when I got my hands on Surface Book for the first time. So I did an unboxing. I talked about my first week with it. It's really become a very reliable device. The technology is superb. I mean, I just pick up the device and it works now. There were a lot of issues early on with drivers and reliability and things of that nature, and I think Microsoft has that figured out now, at least my experience. And it's a great device. And this year we saw the update in October to the performance base and got a little more juice. But the Surface Book is great hardware. I got in on it a few months later, so I did not go through those really rough days. But early on, I had some challenges. But it really is a good piece of hardware. And then the other thing that happened in April is Microsoft formally announced that they were no longer manufacturing the Xbox 360. So it's kind of an end of an era. I got on the Xbox 360 console gaming bandwagon back in 2008, September of that year, because couple of my favorite games for PC, Tiger Woods and Madden, weren't being made for PC anymore. They were only being made for console. So I made that leap and made the change, and then a couple years ago got my Xbox One. So now everything you see being sold for the Xbox 360 is existing stock. So at some point, there are not going to be any more new Xbox 360 devices, because that was in April that they stopped manufacturing those. But now there's been a lot sold over Black Friday, over the Christmas holidays, and things like that. And there's been a lot of discounts and sales on those. So I got to imagine that at some point, those new stock is going to be gone, because April, let's see, that's May, June, July, August, September. So you're talking about 8 months or so that we've been selling from the existing stock. Then we move into May. There was big concerns brought up in May about, was Microsoft putting more ads on the Windows 10 Start menu. People started to see in some of the testing builds these suggestions that were popping up on, now that you can turn them off, but they were popping up on the Start menu. Of course, this is kind of exacerbated because early on in Windows 10, when we saw apps like Solitaire, Mahjong, some of the other new games and games that were in Windows 10, they had ads in those games. People freaked out about that, said it's my OS, it shouldn't be in there. Well, Microsoft does offer some control, but it was an opportunity to kind of explain to people that we don't own Windows. We actually have a license to use Windows. Windows is still owned by Microsoft. Now, that doesn't mean they just need to abuse that trust. And I get that people have concerns about privacy, and we've talked about that over and over again this year on the Observed.Tech podcast. And in my own personal opinion, you get such a level of control over privacy, I think it's a non-issue. I think most of it is just FUD. But, I got more to say in my predictions tomorrow about this whole ads on Windows 10 and where we're going with Windows 10, because the reality is consumer and retail sales of Windows 10 are minimal for just the OS. Most people are getting the new OS on new devices. So we'll talk about that because it does have an impact. OneDrive, finally in May, we saw a universal Windows platform app released for Windows 10 PCs. It was the first time that we had gotten a modern app. Now, you know that with Windows 10, we lost placeholders. Of course, everybody talked about placeholders on Windows 10 going away for OneDrive. And what placeholders were just small files that showed you what you had in the cloud. And you could click on them and download them and things like that. But if you were offline, you couldn't get them, but you'd still see an entry there. And it created some confusion for someone apparently, and therefore they made the change that they got rid of placeholders. And now you had to choose the folders you would sync with OneDrive on your local device. Now, I like that feature because every one of my devices have different storages. and I don't want every file on every device. So I get to manage that, and I love that fact. But it is handy sometimes to know what's there. So if you have an internet connection, and this was necessary with placeholders too, with the Universal Windows Platform OneDrive app, you can now see your entire OneDrive, whether it's online or offline, and you also have choices for offline. So it offered some of that functionality back. But I know it's not a complete replacement for placeholders, but you know, it did provide some capabilities there. May, it was the end of a financial quarter for Microsoft. Another big drop in sales and market share. This was no surprise then. It shouldn't be any surprise now. They stopped building hardware. Microsoft did a big write-down, nearly $1 billion. No, 796 or so, almost $800 billion on that. It was just a bad acquisition, and Microsoft finally cleaned things up and started to move forward at that point. So it was no surprise back then, although people were writing big headlines about the drops as if it was some kind of a shocking thing. The reality is it wasn't a shock that Windows Mobile hardware sales were dropping and sales were falling and market share was falling, because the reality was we hadn't had any new hardware. We barely had a Windows 10 mobile update that was released in the month before, the 2 months before. So it just wasn't a good situation at all when it comes to hardware and the whole setup. Then in June, Microsoft had their big Xbox E3 briefing. What you might recall, they announced Project Scorpio then. This is this high-end console that's going to come out next year. That will be the first upgrade to the Xbox One platform. They also announced Xbox One S. Smaller box, power supply integrated, Blu-ray, HDR, 4K video if you got the right equipment. So a really nice kind of interim upgrade with the Xbox One S, and they've since come out with several different models, several different themed Xbox One S's, and there were some really great deals over the holidays for those devices. And then next year, in that June timeframe, we fully expect Microsoft to announce or formally launch Scorpio for the holidays. So this is going to be that high-end gaming console. Of course, it's going to be based on Windows 10 like it is now, like Xbox One and Xbox One S. But that's going to be a big deal next year, so look for that. Activation issues. Microsoft did two things this year in June that really was going to help minimize activation issues. The first thing is, if you remember back to the release or pre-release of Windows 10, original release of Windows 10 back in 2015, in July of 2015, there were all kinds of issues about upgrades and who would get the upgrade, who wouldn't get the upgrade. What about the license? How does it track? So Microsoft established a digital entitlement, and what they did was that basically this digital entitlement is stored in the cloud, whether you use your Microsoft account or not, because it's ID'd by the hardware, and it allows you to activate that device on subsequent installations. You don't have to enter a product key. If you did a Windows 10 upgrade on a device that was already genuine and it was Windows 7 or Windows 8.1, it would get that digital entitlement. And then they included a new Windows 10 activation troubleshooter. So if you ran into a problem, let's say you had to change a piece of hardware and you ran into a problem, you could run this activation troubleshooter and it would fix it. It would allow you to say, hey, yes, I made a change, or this is the same device, or whatever the answer was. And it would allow you to reactivate that digital entitlement on that piece of hardware. And those two things really went a long way to minimizing these activation issues that people were having with Windows 10. And you know, as I watch social media, that's just something that's not talked about anymore. And so I think that's something they've solved and sorted out. It was in June that we actually got the confirmation of the anniversary release, the anniversary update release date. That was going to be the 2nd of August. And we heard some new usage numbers back then as well. I think that's when they announced 350 million users on the devices on Windows 10 at that point. Then we moved into July. This is now, Microsoft had made a very ambitious goal when they released Windows 10 that they were going to get onto 1 billion devices within 2 to 3 years. In July of this year, they looked at things and decided that that was not realistic, and so they came out and formally said, we don't think we're going to hit this. It's a goal. And so that created a whole lot of stuff going on in the tech news world. But we were also at the 1-year anniversary of Windows 10, so it was, the timing there was right around when Windows 10 anniversary update came out. And so this put us at 1 year of Windows as a service. Now, before Windows 10 was released in 2015, there was a lot of discussions about what is or is not Windows as a service, and we've learned a lot about it since then on both the consumer side and the corporate side, the enterprise side, businesses. And so it really has kind of settled in. We're now used to the routine of receiving cumulative updates each month. We're used to this routine of feature updates. We're used to consumers and enterprise and businesses running the right kind of software can defer those feature updates, but not defer security updates, which is good. And we now have what's called Current Branch for Business. Current Branch, which is the release all consumers use. Current Branch for Business, which is one feature update beyond past. For instance, right now the Current Branch for Business is the anniversary update. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's about to become anniversary update because it's been 4 months. And then come March, they will expire the November update as Current Branch for Business as well. And it'll get a couple months of final support. I did also post. I traveled up to New York City to Microsoft's offices there. Had a great visit in the Microsoft store in New York City, but also got my review briefing from Microsoft on the Windows 10 anniversary update and wrote my big review of that, so you can check that out from July. And then in early August, we got the anniversary update. And again, a lot of great new features in there. And then before long, we started testing Redstone 2, what we now know as the Creators Update. So in August, I started in earnest a lot of new quick tips and how-tos about different new features and functionality in Windows 10 Anniversary Update, so you can go back and check all those things. Also received you might remember the crowdfunding device, Continuum device called NextDock. Now, they had some issues, but they had a fire in the factory, but they finally were able to ship out devices, and I did do a unboxing gallery for that. So we had the NextDock Continuum device, but I think Continuum kind of lost some momentum because we weren't getting new hardware for Windows 10 Mobile. So, but we did start at that point after the release. I think it was a week after the release of the anniversary update, we had our first Redstone 2 build update. And so we started talking about Redstone 2, what we now know as Creators Update, and some of the features that we wanted to see in Redstone 2. Quick Assist. This was a new tool in the Windows 10 Anniversary Update that was not talked about a lot, and I think it was important enough to mention in this end of year show, because if you provide family tech support and if you're not in the same place, you got to connect remotely. Quick Assist is great. You just drop a shortcut for this on their desktop or their start menu. They click that to get started with them when you're with them on the phone, and then you can start up Quick Assist to provide assistance. They have a number, they have a password, you pass it, boom, you're connected. They grant you control of the system, and you can work on their system right there online remotely. And then we did get in August, I think it was late August, let me check the date to be sure, but the anniversary update released for mobile devices, so they did not come out at the same time. We got the anniversary update was on the 16th of August, so 2 weeks after the PC version of the anniversary update was released, we got the version for Windows 10 Mobile. So people continue to say things aren't moving forward with Windows 10 Mobile this year, but they are. Every time Windows 10 Core gets updated, we're seeing similar updates in Windows 10 Mobile. Windows 10 is Windows 10 is Windows 10. Whether you run it on a PC, a tablet, Xbox One, an Internet of Things device, a HoloLens, a Surface Hub, or a mobile device, it's Windows 10, and we're starting to see those similarities across the platforms, across the ecosystem. But so when people say Microsoft has abandoned Windows 10 Mobile, it's just not true. Is it getting a lot of attention? No, because there's no new hardware. There's no big companies. There's some big companies coming out with apps, but there's not a lot of them. So it kind of feels like it's languishing, probably because it's not getting some of that new stuff. But it is being actively developed right alongside of the PC and tablet version. So it is being worked on. And I got, with some of the things we heard at WinHeck, and I'm going to talk about those, it looks like we are going to see some real movement in the mobile side of Windows 10. And for me, mobile does not always mean phone. Okay, so we'll talk about that. September, Microsoft Ignite happened up in Atlanta, Georgia. I got to ride my motorcycle to an event for a change since I'm here in Northeast Florida, that was a great trip. Other things that started that month, Samsung Galaxy Note 7. That's probably one of the big tech notes of this year. I know it's not Microsoft related, but that's when they started their global recall due to battery fires. The reports have been trickling in of several different things, and finally Samsung decided to do the whole recall. And we now know that as of now, the final kind of steps are being made to deactivate those devices, to basically break their charging through a firmware update, a mandatory firmware update, so they cannot be charged anymore. Once they're not chargeable, they will eventually run out of power and they will not be a fire hazard. Samsung wrote off $1 billion in marketing, research and development, everything about that. They wrote off almost $1 billion in that whole process of stuff. So not a very good thing for Samsung Mobile for sure. And in fact, today, if you travel, you hear the announcements when you get to the airport, when you're at the gate, when you're on the airplane. The Samsung Note 7, Galaxy Note 7 is getting a lot of post attention because of its safety issues. What else did we see in September? We saw a build of Creators Update come out, Redstone 2, that had this new Windows Anywhere feature that looked like it was part of Sync, and it was going to be maybe a rework of the Windows 10 syncing UI. In current builds, that is gone. Syncing's still there, but the whole name Windows Anywhere is gone. I don't know if that's going to make a comeback. Is it going to be in a future build? We have to watch and see what happens next month as we start to get new builds, and whether or not we start to see those come, we start to see those settle in on the feature update, the features they're going to lock in for Creators Update. This was also when Microsoft released an update through Windows Update to remove the Get Windows 10 app. Now, the Get Windows 10 app was downloaded to Windows 7 and 8.1 devices that were eligible for the Windows 10 upgrade, and it had a little tray icon, and it would pop up and remind you. Then it got a little bit aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive, to the point where it even ignored your X-click for cancel, and it scheduled it anyway. All kinds of issues, all kinds of trust issues between Microsoft and users. And it's why I say, in 2017, they need to bring back the free upgrade, but don't push it. Make it available, talk about it, point to it, and let people go get it. Don't force them through it, or don't service up through Windows Update, because it just creates a negative environment. But I think there's a good opportunity with the smaller the businesses becoming around Microsoft when it comes to consumer and retail sales of the OS itself, not new devices, that's OEMs. But I think there's an opportunity to maybe keep that conversion rolling beyond what it's doing right now. And yes, I know there's a free download, and you can use current product keys to get that free download, but that's not an official channel. It's not one Microsoft talks about. It's what everybody else talks about. So if you think, imagine if they were able to talk about the fact that you can go get that download, and it will work with all the right digital entitlement stuff. It'll find your BIOS keys. It'll find the key. You can enter the key off a sticker on the side of the device if you're on an eligible device, such as Windows 7 and 8.1. Why not continue to offer that and keep that momentum moving forward? It won't be as fast. This is not about metrics, but it's about a steady flow of new upgrades and people getting on a more secure OS, because Windows 10 is that. It is more secure. Microsoft Ignite, massive expo show floor. I've never been on one that big before, I don't think. I think next week at CES that may change. But I did some work on galleries about the expo show floor. I did galleries for the Microsoft showcase. Got around the spaces and checked out a lot of neat products, so you can make sure and go back to all the September content and see what it was like at Ignite. Ignite is also where I kind of revisited HoloLens, and I did the Mars experience. They had it down in Kennedy Space Center this summer, but I did the Mars experience, and am I thinking the right things? No. A Build is where they had the Mars experience, and that was where I got to do the hour-long, I think, hour and a half long, maybe 2 hour long HoloLens session. And my viewpoint of HoloLens really changed, because as I became active with it, and I lost awareness of the field of view, because you just naturally turn and look, and I was interacting with other people. So I really did see the potential at that point of HoloLens and what it can do, and I just think it's going to be a terrific device. And now, as we know, with the announcements around Creators Update, is that we're going to see a mixed reality, which is a part virtual reality, part augmented reality, integral integral into that operating system update. And that brings us to October. October, we had two big events. First one was IT Dev Connections. It was my second one, and I was working social media and some other content coverage there. and had a lot of fun. It was a great conference. This coming year it's going to be in San Francisco, not in Las Vegas, so it's a change of location. So if you're interested in that, you can check out Dev Connections. We also had the Windows 10 event. The October Windows 10 event is where we went up to New York City, and Microsoft announced Surface Studio. They announced Surface Book with Performance Base. We saw the new accessories, the Surface ergonomic keyboard, the Surface keyboard, Surface mouse, Surface dial. It was a great event. I think Microsoft, there were some rumors already leaked that we were going to see an all-in-one device, but I think people were really blown away by it. That was also the month that Eve, the Eve Devices company over in Finland, crowdsourced and released their early purchases for their E5, which looks to be a really awesome Windows 10 2-in-1 device. We saw Surface Studio in that form factor, and it just, the way it goes down to a 20-degree angle to become a workstation or a studio or an easel or a drafting table, tremendous amounts of opportunity for creativity. As I walked around the showcase at the event that day in New York City, I saw people using it for all types of purposes. I even got to play some Forza Horizon 3 on it, so it was good for that. It was good for painting creativity like that, using Surface Dial, Surface Pen. Watching an architect use it to make architectural drawings. So tremendous amount of potential for that device. And in fact, we're now learning that it was sold well above expectations, and manufacturing almost could not keep up, and they've had to kind of ramp things up, but that's a good thing. We also heard of the Windows 10 Creators Update. Redstone 2, the code name, was officially given its proper title, and that's called the Creators Update. And it was focused on 3D for everyone. We saw new 3D apps. We saw new 3D viewing apps. And then the next day, Apple had their product announcement, their updated MacBook Pro line. And what you saw was a juxtaposition of where the discussion on social media was just awesome, because people were talking about that Microsoft had taken over the creativity helm with the release of Surface Studio, that Apple was kind of treading water. There wasn't a whole lot new. The touch bar was gimmicky. And it was tremendous to see the flip-flop of people and how they viewed things coming out of Microsoft compared to what was coming out of Apple. So that was an interesting October. November started off with me heading out to Microsoft for MVP Summit. Got to meet some tremendous new people. Got to meet my new fellow Microsoft Insider MVPs in that new program. But because I'm also an IT Pro and Devices, Windows and Devices IT MVP, I got to meet those folks as well. So I always love going out to Summit. I love being on campus. This was my 7th trip, I think, 6th or 7th trip. And it is a great week to meet up with old friends from around the world, as well as the folks at Microsoft, and get to hear from the product teams and learn what's going on. November was also the official month when OEM sales of Windows 7 Professional and Windows 8.1 stopped. So OEMs could no longer sell devices or copies of those OSs. So that's a big change in the momentum towards Windows 10 and devices for Windows 10. Microsoft also, just before MVP Summit, announced a new MVP Reconnect program that allows MVP alumni to get back involved in some ways with Microsoft as the community of alumni. And so it was a really neat reward package. They sent a really nice coin, a certificate, and stuff like that. So I know a lot of people took advantage of that. We also had the October Office event, and that's where we heard about Microsoft Teams, this new collaboration software that kind of overlays on top of Office 365 services and gives a team access to a channel that is used for chat, video, calls, message, document sharing. I mean, everything that you can do in Office 365 basically rolled up into one window, one interface. And so we did do some testing. I did a lot of content on Windows IT Pro about different features with that. I was very impressed with it. It's going to get some features updated in January that will allow people to invite outsiders. Right then it was restricted to who was inside of your organization, but they are eventually going to open that up so that you can invite outsiders, contractors, for instance, and things of that nature into your team. And I think that's when that might just give Slack a run for its money. And then there was a lot of concern over Windows Defender, and that Windows Defender wasn't playing well with third-party security software, that it didn't get out of the way properly. And I had to write about my own experience with Windows Defender, and that I've never seen it not behave properly when another antiviruses on there. Microsoft built some features into Windows Defender that if your existing third-party software expires, it'll warn you, it'll caution you, it'll say it's out of date. And then at some point, about 30 days later, it will simply turn Defender back on so that there is some level of protection on your system. I mean, this makes a lot of sense because otherwise, I mean, when I go work on systems, the ones that are in worse shape are usually on expired signatures. They haven't had new signatures for months, and so their antivirus software is useless without new signatures. I've been using Windows Defender on every device I own since it was Microsoft Security Essentials, and the combination of that and good smart computing habits, the stuff between your finger and your brain, has done us fine, and knock on wood, we continue to be infection free. So I will take that every day. In December, more 3D stuff coming out with the Creators Update. We saw the View 3D app where you can view 3D models, and I shared with you NASA's archive and where you can go download some really cool stuff of satellites and Mars rovers and International Space Station. A lot of fun there. Windows Defender, the dashboard. Now, people picked up on this in the video in October during the Surface Studio launch, that there was this new Windows Defender dashboard. Well, in December, we got our first build of the Creators Update, Redstone 2, that had the new dashboard in it, so that was fun to explore. And then we had the 12 days of deals, and I got a hold of the new Vision W610L, an 8-inch Windows 10 tablet. And just yesterday, I published my kind of 2 weeks on and how it's working for me. I did a tablet unboxing and first initial hands-on with it back in early December. And it's a great little device. It's perfect for consumption. I think it's a great fit. It's an awesome deal at $59. That was its deal during the 12 days of deals, but now it's back up to its normal of $149. I'm not so sure that's the price point I would have entered at. I think maybe $99 might have been okay, but I'm not sure $149 would have been a price point I would have entered for that type of a device where it really is purely a consumption device. Microsoft Edge got 2 new extensions during the month of December that brought the total up to 22. As I said earlier, that program is still closed. People are still not being allowed to publicly submit stuff. It's a partnership type thing, but I hope the Creators Update will be the version of Windows 10 that they finally open that program up and let others get in their extensions. And I'm not talking about you converting an extension for personal use. I'm talking about developers. The tools are out there for them to convert their own things, and they can already do this, I think. They just can't publicly submit them, or they got to work with Microsoft to get them in the list or get them through the approval process. But eventually, it'll be like a store submission. It'll be like submitting an app. They'll submit it to the store. It'll get reviewed, looked over, certified, and then made available to people to download. So January through December, that's kind of what happened. That was some of the highlights, I think, of the past year. Some other things going on with Microsoft. They announced a big shuffle of their conference schedule for 2017. So with these changes, we are seeing some new locales, new names. So let me run down the list for you just real quick and share with you what Microsoft shared. I'm just bringing up the, there it is. Okay, so first, Microsoft Build is no longer in San Francisco this coming year. It's going to be in late March, early April, as it normally is. It's going to be in May in Seattle. So that will be a very interesting change of location. Creators Update will have been out for a couple months as well. So this build will be following the Creators Update release. So it'll be interesting to see what they bring to the table. And maybe that's when we find out some of the major features for the fall, what's expected to be Redstone 3, the second feature update of 2017. Let's see, Microsoft's Worldwide Partner Conference is being rebranded as Microsoft Inspire, and the next year's version of that will happen in July from the 9th to the 13th in Washington, D.C., right in the middle of summer, so be ready to sweat it out. It is humid on the East Coast and in that area during that time of year. The other big change is Microsoft Ignite. It's already been announced for Orlando, Florida. Last year they announced it at the end of Ignite in Atlanta for the 25th to the 29th of September. But the big difference is, and last year it was 23,000 people in Atlanta, it's now going to incorporate Microsoft Envision. This is a conference that used to exist separately, and it had about 6,000 attendees. So we could be looking at 30,000 people in Orlando this September for Microsoft Ignite, which will be, it's their big mega conference. So those are the kind of changes that we've seen come down when it relates to different Microsoft conferences and shows. And then I've got a few other subject areas to talk about. The first one is WinHack. At the Windows Hardware and Engineering Community Conference in China a few weeks ago, we heard the big news about Project Evo. Project Evo is a partnership between Microsoft and Intel and other companies to develop head-mounted devices that you would wear for mixed reality experiences, virtual reality experiences, augmented reality experiences. And Project Evo partnership means that this will work with some very decently spec'd computers. You don't have to have real high-end computers like you do with an Oculus Rift in order to get full functionality. Now, I'm hoping to see some of this at CES next week when I travel out to Vegas for that, but you can expect to hear more about this as we get closer to the release of Creators Update in March. In fact, I am going to be able to see a couple of the devices because I'm going to Microsoft's device event next week. We also heard about Windows 10 on ARM. This is a partnership with Qualcomm that is going to bring Windows 10 to ARM-based devices, but the big difference here compared to like Surface RT or Windows RT is that these ARM-based devices are going to have emulation of x86 apps. So programs that run on a normal desktop will run on an ARM-based device in emulation. This opens up a huge opportunity for so many different things. And when you tie this to the announcements relating to Cortana and some of the things that she's going to be able to do, near-field audio to be picked up across the room. Cortana is going to be this whole home hub rumor that's been floating around is tied to this as well. We saw a tease video for this Harman Kardon speaker that is Cortana. It looks a little bit like an Amazon Echo or an Echo Dot. So we're really going to see a movement towards low-powered, efficient battery-based devices that are going to be on ARM that can run any software, and that means Microsoft's Virtual SIM is going to come around where you can actually get data like as if you had a SIM in your device, and you can buy temporary access to wireless data. You are also going to be able to use these kind of devices with Cortana. We're already seeing in some of the builds for Redstone 2 for the Creators Update where I can actually call out to Cortana across the room and she will answer me. So, and it's a full screen experience when you're on the lock screen. The device does not have to be unlocked. So imagine those kind of features and functionality on ARM-based, low-power, highly efficient devices. And so we're really starting to see that change. And the smart move here by Microsoft is they're partnering for this. They're providing the software and services, and their hardware partners are going to provide the hardware, the devices. And so this Harman Kardon partnership is a perfect example of that with this teased device that we saw the video, a very short video of. So lots of good news out of WinHack. I've got a kind of summary of the highlights of that the information that they shared about that with Cortana and the capabilities that we're going to see with Project Evo and the Qualcomm partnership for Windows 10 on ARM. So those are the kind of things. The Windows 10 on ARM thing I think is probably going to be focused with the fall update, which Redstone 3, which we don't know what it's going to be called yet. I think that's where all that attention will go because the focus in Creators Update is the whole mixed reality, 3D for everyone, all that kind of stuff. Back at Build, during Build was when we heard about the anniversary update, that it was going to be called the anniversary update, and we saw some of the new features demoed back then. Lots of Skype bot stuff, a lot of machine learning, a lot of intelligent platform stuff came out at Build. I went to a briefing by Gabe All and a couple others about the Windows Insider program and heard some interesting numbers and stats for that. HoloLens re-experience. This is when I really got my new view of HoloLens. Build was just spectacular for that because I got almost 2 hours with the device along with a whole group of people where we interacted with each other using the device, and it wasn't just a single kind of focused look here, look there demo like it was at Build 2015. So that's when I kind of got my restricted field of view. That changed a lot at Build this year. And then, of course, they had that whole Mars experience with HoloLens, which was terrific. I mean, when you're comfortable with that device, standing up, looking around, walking around, it just changed my view of HoloLens tremendously. We also heard a lot about gaming on Windows 10 at that. We heard about the new Xbox Dev Mode. We heard about Universal Windows Platform apps on Xbox. And, of course, now, you know, several months later, we are seeing all those things in fruition on the devices. Back in September at Ignite, lots of work. There were some consumer related tidbits. It is an IT pro focused conference, but we did get some good stuff out of that conference. We heard a lot about what was coming down the road. They really focus, again, Microsoft is really focusing on mobile first, cloud first, the machine learning, the intelligent platform stuff, and this was just a continuation of that. Looking back on Xbox in 2016, the Xbox sales in the US were #1 in July, August, September, October for 4 months in a row, but everything before that in 2016 from January to June, PS4, and so far November was PS4 again. We don't know about December yet. We won't know about that for a couple weeks. But Xbox Insider program changed. It's no longer a preview program, but we now have an Insider program that anybody can join. You download a hub, you install it on your console, and you gain access to early features, to some gaming, some other things, surveys and opinions, and asking you to test things and try things out, and guided tasks to look for bugs. So things have changed a little bit. They are not allowing more people into the build-to-build preview program, but if you were previously on that, you get to retain that. But Xbox One console's doing very well. Xbox One S is doing very well. Sales have been good. Game sales have been good. So the platform itself is doing very well. Started a new feature on SuperSite last week that will be a regular feature, Ask WinOBS. So if you jump on Twitter at WinOBS and you ask me a question, I will look to answer some of those in columns on the SuperSite for Windows. Speaking of SuperSite for Windows, we're currently going through a transition where we're getting ready to move to a new back end and a new front end, and so you're going to get to see a whole new version of our site. Creators Update, which is all the focus now because we're very quickly approaching the release of the Creators Update in March. Some new things we've seen recently are Windows 10 themes in the Windows Store. So we now can, whereas before you download them off a WinSite and you open the theme pack, and you still have to do that in the 14986 build of Redstone 2, the Creators Update. You have to manually install them. You can now go ahead and use those. They're not built into the interface completely. You still access them through the old legacy theme applet in the control panel. But I'm going to talk about the leak in a minute, but 14997 that leaked out this week shows us that has been integrated into the OS now, into Windows settings. Creators Update is not just a consumer update. This was the big hit on it back in October because all the focus was on the consumer side, the 3D for everyone and things of that nature. It's going to have new security features and enhancements for business users as well. So where Windows 10, every release, the initial release, the November update in 2015, the anniversary update a couple months ago, every release of Windows 10, every feature update release has had a new focus on security, added more to it, more for whether it be management or other features. So this Creators Update is not missing out on those opportunities as well. So if you're in enterprise business type work, you are going to see an update to the Creators Update that's going to enhance your security. We're currently in a pause, like I mentioned, for a new Redstone 2 builds, but they have implemented the new unified update platform. And so with 14986 and subsequent builds, we're going to get Delta downloads. So you're not going to get an entire build of 3 gigabytes. You're only going to get what you need to update your system. So it means smaller downloads should be faster, and it should be a faster upgrade process as well. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about this leak build. Now, I haven't tried this leak build, but my fellow MVP, Mauro Hukalak, who writes for Windows Central, you can find him on Twitter at PureInfoTech, wrote about it and kind of took a peek into what is in this leaked build. Now, the build number is 14997. It's just above 14986, so it's not far down the road at all from what we have, what was the final build of 2016. But some of the things that people are seeing in there that Mauro talked about, let's see. Installation out of the box. Cortana is now integrated into the out of the box process where you can actually give voice commands to go through setup. What else? Let me see. Start menu changes. Cortana. They say start folders. So you know how you can do a folder on Windows 10 Mobile where you can drag that to over top of another icon and create a folder and then create a whole folder of shortcuts. Apparently that is coming to Windows 10 Creators Update. That is in this leaked build. of 14997. So you can group tiles together in there. Keyboard shortcut for Katana, Windows key C, that you get an option to implement. The new share, right now we still have share flying out from the side like it did in Windows 8, 8.1. But in this leaked build, that share is now a window on the desktop. And I'm really hoping that I want the ability to share from any app, from any program. Right now, if I'm in Internet Explorer, I can't share to, say, OneNote. But if I'm in Edge, I can. So I really hope they clean that up and that we get the ability to share from any program we have open on our desktop. So sharing. Lots of new settings coming. There's all the app stuff that was in system before looks like it's getting its own category. So it looks like you're going to have an app section for managing notifications and things of that nature. Looks like the blue light. Now, if you're not familiar with what blue light is, some of the colors that we see when we work on a computer make our brain think it's daytime. They don't allow our bodies to start to shut down for sleep mode. Well, by putting the blues in there and changing that color a little bit, getting rid of the blues, it allows your body not to kind of have your brain engaged thinking that you need to stay awake. So there is a setting for blue light being enabled in this leaked build, but it is apparently not working. I don't know if anybody's got it working yet. It's going to have a shortcut in the Action Center and the Notification Center. One button, turn it on, turn it off. There's some new storage options coming, it looks like, where they're managing storage spaces in Windows 10 Settings app. So we know that the legacy control panel is slowly being phased out, and we should start to see more and more of the legacy, like, for instance, the Windows 10 themes. Looks like they're being integrated into Windows setting. It looks like other devices are being integrated and other features are being integrated from legacy control panel into the new Windows setting. So it looks like that continues as well. Themes we talked about. Apps, so there's new features for apps and the ability to do a little bit more with them as far as reset. There's even an uninstall option apparently for OneDrive now. Windows Update, there is a feature called Pause Updates. Now, a lot of people have been reporting on this over the last few days. And it's an enterprise build that leaked of 14997 of Windows 10 Creators Update. So I'm not of the mind that this Pause Updates is targeted towards consumers. Maybe when we see a Windows 10 Home or Windows 10 Pro build, we will see that. Now, this Pause Updates may not be for security updates. It might just be for drivers. I don't think it's for feature. In Pro and you can defer feature updates for up to 4 months. That's so it can be on Current Branch for Business. That allows it to do that on Enterprise as well. So there's still a lot to be known about this Pause Updates that everybody's reporting on. I personally don't think it's a consumer feature. I think it's an enterprise feature. Let's see, Windows Defender's dashboard continues to evolve, so there's more integration there that we saw the first stuff of earlier this month. Device performance and health features, so now you can see device driver status, storage capacity, Windows Update, battery life on one page, which is kind of cool to be able to see that, and that's part of Windows Defender as well. New Refresh Windows tool. That will let you do a clean install of Windows 10 with latest updates, and it keeps your personal files, most of your settings, but it removes most of your applications. So it looks like they're working on something there. Firewall and network protection. Again, these are all integrations into Windows Defender, into this new interface of Windows Defender. So it looks like Windows Defender is starting to take on more than just a security profile, but also maintaining your system. Family options. How about this? How about family options coming into Windows Defender as well, to where I think Windows Defender is kind of becoming your one-stop shop for the security and stability and reliability of your Windows 10 installation. Microsoft Edge, some new features coming for tabs to be able to set aside tabs and save them. What else is on here? Yeah, that's kind of the end of the list. So it'll be interesting to see this build. I would really love to see what that first build after the new year is going to be, because depending on where the build labs are, we might see 14997 or higher. There's already been some scuttlebutt on Twitter. Scuttlebutt is Navy term for rumors that Microsoft has already done build 15000 in the process of Redstone 2. That's not surprising. They were right on top of that build number anyway, and the build number itself is not significant, and sometimes they skip build numbers. It doesn't mean they've made 15,000 builds. but we don't see every build publicly either, so a lot of that is internal. So it'll be interesting to see what that first build is. It'll be interesting to see how fast we see that first build after the new year. I think you can start to expect people back at work next week on the 2nd of January, and then how quick, we might not see that first new build of Redstone 2 until the following week, because the way the cycle works, which this is public info, they kind of start their week off with the new build, testing it in Canary, and then it goes to the Insider or to Microsoft in a fast ring, and then it comes to Insider. So it may take a week for the whole cycle to kick back in. Otherwise, I think they have to push out an older build, and I'm not sure they're going to want to do that. So I mentioned that tomorrow, which will be the 30th of December, Friday, the day after recording episode 215 of the Observed.Tech podcast, my predictions article is coming out on SuperSite, so you can catch that for all the predictions I'm making for next year for Windows 10, which includes my, hey, open back up that free giveaway and just make it a giveaway. On Tuesday of next week, very early in the morning, I jump on an airplane and I head off to CES, my first ever trip to CES. I am really psyched and excited. The last 4 or 5 weeks, the influx and craziness of the emails and scheduling and making sure I scheduled at the right times and I didn't confuse my time zones. I think I've got things sorted out, so it's going to be a crazy, crazy 5 days. I mean, I start the moment I hit the ground on Tuesday around lunchtime in Las Vegas. But so social media, WinOBS, SuperSite for Windows, expect Twitter periscoping. I'm going to do everything I can to bring you as much information about the whole CES experience that I can. Plus, of course, we're going to just have a lot of content out of that. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of neat and cool, innovative products that I see out there. So I'm really, really excited about that trip out to Las Vegas next week for my first ever CES. And that's it. That's what I've got for you for the year in review. I hope this was helpful to kind of revisit and go back to where we were, what happened over the last year. Sometimes we move forward so fast that we forget that there was a process to get into where we are today. And 2016 was full of process, full of opportunity, full of disappointments. But, 2017 gives us new opportunities. And, we just will have to keep our eyes open, keep looking down the road, and keep looking forward and see what comes down our way. So thanks a lot. We're going to put episode 215 in the can. This was our first live stream as well, so I'll put a link on the show notes page to the YouTube experience of it, where you can see the video and the audio part of this. Of course, it will still come out via its normal audio channels, as we always do with Observed.Tech, thanks to our folks, our partners at techpodcast.com and Blueberry. And I appreciate everybody listening. I appreciate the people who tune in each week. I appreciate the people who ping me when I miss a show or two because of other things and say, hey, miss you, what's going on, everything okay? So I appreciate the dedication to the audience and the people who listen every week. And I really do look forward to 2017 and what's new to come. There's great stuff on the horizon for Observed.Tech and Windows Observer and SuperSite for Windows. And I can't wait to share more of those details with you. But until then, stay safe out there, keep your computers up to date, and have a safe end of 2016. And we'll see you next year. Take care. All right. I don't know if we're still on the live stream or not. I haven't even looked at Twitter to see how things are going. I just let things kind of run there. So before I shut down see if anybody talked to me while I was doing that recording. Okay, not a whole lot. All right. Did see a couple notes in the chat from my friend Robert out in San Francisco. I'm not sure what he said boo about, but I do not see this thing doing anything on the page that I'm looking at. So I am going to go ahead and shut down this stream, and it looks like it worked okay. I don't show any drop frames in the broadcaster, so I'm going to go ahead and drop this stream and let it update to YouTube, and we will get to post-processing episode 215. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a safe end of 2016, and we'll see you next year. Take care.